Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is October the 9th, 2024. It has been 3,908 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 231 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 228 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 65 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened on Tuesday and Wednesday morning. Our Russia-Ukraine war map is a great companion to the podcast, and there is a link in the podcast description. There are map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine war report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. Without a major event, such as the use of chemical, biological, radiological or nuclear weapons, Russian forces won't recapture the Kursk region of Russia or capture Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, New York, Mirnograd, Pokrovsk, Kurakhove and Selidove by autocrat Vladimir Putin's October the 15th deadline. 2. We remain unsure if the current operational tempo is a new normal or if Moscow is attempting to advance as far as possible before fall weather arrives. We maintain that the current intensity of fighting is unsustainable, and at some point Russian combat operations have to decline. 3. In our assessment, Moscow does not have or will not commit a sufficiently large enough force to liberate the Ukrainian-occupied parts of the Kursk Oblast. Additionally, the September attacks on ammunition depots in the Tver region are starting to negatively impact Russia's offensive capabilities. 4. Continued nuclear threats from Moscow highlight how the world remains caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. 5. The lack of a meaningful response by Ukraine's allies and international organizations to open and unrestricted attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure by Russia has convinced Moscow this is an effective strategy with no political consequences. 6. Russia will maintain its attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. The continued attacks are increasing the probability of a nuclear accident at one or more of Ukraine's nuclear power plants due to a loss of external power connections. 7. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States is a complete failure that has only encouraged Russia to escalate hybrid and kinetic warfare actions against the NATO alliance and Ukraine's allies and their economic interests. 8. The Russian economy is much weaker than reported. 9. We maintain there could be a shift in Washington's policy toward Ukraine's request for deep strikes within Russia after the November the 5th national elections. Yesterday, Russia carried out 172 discrete assaults, the same as the day before, and through October the 8th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks increased slightly to 155. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine did not release data on Russian airstrikes and fire missions. There were no changes in territorial control in the Kursk Oblast, and for the second day in a row, there were almost no intelligence. Clouds obscured the October the 7th Sentinel-2LA satellite pass. Today's action report will focus on Ukraine. Ready? Here we go. In the Kharkiv Oblast, Ukrainian drone operators attacked a squad of Russian troops fleeing the machine aggregate plant in Vovchansk, confirming that neither combatant has military control of the area. East of Kupiansk, fighting continued along the entire line of conflict, with no change in the situation. In occupied Luhansk Oblast near Chornukhine, a Russian Kasta 2E1 radar system was damaged by two M30 variant rockets fired by HIMARS. The 2E1 command post and power supply vehicle received the most damage. The radar system was developed during the Cold War and produced from 1989 to 2003. It is designed to detect targets flying at ultra-low altitudes, such as larger drones and cruise missiles. The 2E1 has two radar receivers versus the more modern 2E2, which has a single receiver mounted on a mast and does not require a second support vehicle. In the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast near Siversk, two Russian soldiers were recorded by a drone on the northern edge of Grigorivka, holding a Russian flag out of view from any direction that wasn't up. There are no indications that Ukrainian forces withdrew from Bilogorivka to Serebryanka, or that Russian forces advanced in the Serebryansky forest to the Siversky Donets River. In our assessment, this was a sabotage and reconnaissance squad that crossed the river using an inflatable boat or swimming for a picture report. Russian forces also released a video showing a flag in the western part of Verkhnyokamyensk, with no Russian troops present. In our assessment, this was placed by a drone and does not reflect a Russian advance. It has been a week since the Minister of Defense of Russia, Andrei Belousov, claimed that the critical settlement had been captured while providing no evidence. The video, released by Russian state media agency Izvestia, was heavily edited and included clips that were unrelated to fighting in the Siversk area. South of Siversk, Ukrainian forces recaptured their train station southeast of Vyimka, advancing 500 meters. In Toretsk, hours after Russia released videos showing the southern part of the city being bombed, Ukraine released videos showing Russian forces being attacked in the same area. It is unclear if Russian units advanced from the north, east or south. The grey area was expanded by 1,200 meters. In our assessment, Ukrainian forces still control the Tarokans at the mine complex, which will complicate Russia's ability to hold new positions in this area. We've mapped numerous claimed Russian advances in Toretsk based on geolocation to reverse the change 48 to 72 hours later. In the southwestern part of the Donetsk Oblast, near Kurakhove, Russian state media agency TASS released a video showing a squad of Russian soldiers raising a flag in the southeastern part of Zhelanne Persha. The map was adjusted to reflect the Russian advances. We link to all of the videos I just talked about in our daily situation report. There's more information in the podcast description. Video from the Ukrainian 46th Air Mobile Brigade showed that Russian forces did not consolidate their gains in Ostrivske, and fighting had moved 1,000 meters east between the village and Hostra. Fighting is intense, with Ukrainian forces destroying 2 tanks, 2 armored personnel carriers, and 5 infantry fighting vehicles. East of Vremivka, Russian sources have not released any information that would confirm that Zolota Niva was captured after a Russian column advanced into the settlement. With 3 flag raisings in the last 24 hours, the lack of one makes us skeptical that Russian troops consolidated their gains. We left the map unchanged. The Russian Ministry of Defense released a video of an artillery crew in the Vuhledar area using a D-74 122mm field gun. The D-74 was developed at the end of World War II and entered service in 1955. The artillery piece has a range of 24 kilometers, but more important, it does not use the same ammunition as the D-30 howitzer that replaced it just 5 years later. Russia may be receiving ammunition from North Korea, which produced the Type 60 field gun. The introduction of the D-74 is another data point suggesting that the Kremlin is having problems sustaining its more modern artillery systems. In the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, Russian claims of capturing the northern half of Kamyansk are unsupported by videos from both combatants, which show they were unable to consolidate their gains and suffered heavy losses. In occupied Voskresenka, a Russian ASA AKM air defense system was destroyed by a rocket attack. Ukrainian forces released one of the most epic drone strike videos of the war from the occupied part of the Kherson Oblast. The brief video shows a drone entering through the door of a building and hitting a bare-ass Russian soldier, well, to quote Forrest Gump, in the buttocks. Yes, we'll link to the video, just make sure you don't watch it at work. For the third day, the fuel depot and transshipment facility in Feodosia continued to burn out of control. The fire has almost doubled in size, and satellite images show the scope of the damage. The smoke plume is 54 kilometers long and visible from space. At least 9 of the 36 tanks at the facility have been destroyed or are visibly damaged. On the Russian front, Ukraine successfully attacked the 67th Main Missile and Artillery Directorate arsenal at Kharkiv in the Bryansk Oblast of Russia. An over 4-minute-long video recorded approximately 4.8 kilometers away captured multiple flashes and the sound of continuous ammunition explosions. The 3.5 square kilometer arsenal is approaching 100 years old, has 4 railroad connections, and was used by the Germans during World War II. It has not undergone significant modernization since 1965 and includes a combination of bunkers, sheds, and open-air ammunition storage. Records show the facility stores small arms and large-caliber ammunition, as well as non-precision bombs, and can hold up to 22,000 metric tons of munitions and explosives. At the time of publication, the Russian Ministry of Defense had not acknowledged the situation, only claiming that over 45 drones were shot down, including 24 over Bryansk.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Here is today's Theaterwide update. United States President Joe Biden was forced to cancel his planned October the 10th to the 13th trip to Ramstein, Germany, to lead the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. The White House decided to pull out of the meeting due to Hurricane Milton, which is expected to make landfall in Florida later today. At the time of recording, Milton was a Category 5 storm, the strongest possible rating on the Saffir-Simpson scale, with 260 km per hour sustained winds with higher gusts. Milton could be historic, with a storm surge of 4.5 meters, which could coincide with high tide, and is expected near the storm center with tropical storm forces winds of at least 63 km per hour, covering an 800 km wide area. For the 57% of my listeners not from the United States, this is the right decision. The US government is also facing an unprecedented disinformation crisis after Hurricane Helene struck Florida on September the 26th and Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina on September the 27th, leaving over 220 dead and billions of dollars in damage. 2 ambassadors with NATO reported that the October Defense Contact Group meeting had been completely cancelled. With US elections slated for November the 5th, the October confab will likely be scrapped. The Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, is blocking $38.4 billion in aid to Ukraine, citing the upcoming United States election and the need to wait for the outcome. Speaking with reporters, Orban claimed that former President and presidential candidate Donald Trump would not wait until his inauguration to make a peace deal between Moscow and Kyiv. The State Customs Service of Ukraine reported that Polish farmers, backed by Russian agents and the pro-Kremlin Confederate Party, are planning to blockade the Medyka-Shehiny checkpoint this week and maintain its closure through the end of the year. The new blockade is planned despite receiving extensive concessions from the European Union in the spring and financial aid. One of the last year's organizers, Rafal Mekler, called for the new protest, writing, quote, "Work in the fields is over, and we can fight for what is right." Mekler heads the Lublin branch of the far-right and pro-Kremlin Confederation Liberty and Independence Party. He also owns Rafal Mekler Transport, a trucking company that ships to Belarus and Russia. Retired Washington Post journalist Bob Woodward released a new book, War, providing an insider's view of discussions in the Trump and Biden White Houses. No one of our team has read the book for themselves, but there were multiple media reports about the content. Woodward shared the following. President Biden blames former President Barack Obama for his inaction after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, saying, quote, "Barack never took Putin seriously. We did nothing. We gave Putin a license to continue. Well, I'm revoking his fucking license." The Biden administration had direct intelligence from within the Kremlin in October 2021 that Russia planned to expand its war of aggression with a force of 175,000 troops, and that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky ignored warnings from Washington. Woodward claims that when CIA Director Bill Burns briefed Biden, he exclaimed, quote, "Jesus Christ, now I've got to deal with Russia swallowing Ukraine?" Biden and Putin reportedly had a 50-minute phone call in December 2021 about Russia's invasion plans that became so heated Putin threatened nuclear war. Woodward also wrote that in September 2022 the CIA had, quote, "exquisite intelligence indicating there was a 50-50 chance Putin would use tactical nuclear weapons, far exceeding any public statement made during the period." In a phone conversation between U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, Austin indicated that if Russia used weapons of mass destruction, Washington would consider removing, quote, "constraints that were put in place." Shoigu reportedly told Austin, quote, "I don't take kindly to be threatened," with Austin replying, quote, "I am the leader of the most powerful military in the history of the world. I don't make threats." 2 days after the call, Shoigu called Austin, claiming Ukraine was preparing a dirty bomb, which led to the International Atomic Energy Agency inspecting all of Ukraine's nuclear sites. Shoigu reportedly tried to convince Austin this justified a planned nuclear strike on Ukraine, with Austin tersely responding, quote, "Don't do it." What do our analysts think about the snippets? First, the Biden administration based their policies for Ukraine on the belief that the country was incapable of defending itself, which explains their February 25, 2022 offer to evacuate President Volodymyr Zelensky, his family, and key officials. It also explains why, while other nations like Poland offered its entire fleet of MiG-29s in March 2022, and other countries were ready to provide artillery, air defense, and main battle tanks, Washington initially supplied Ukraine to fight a guerrilla war. Many of the policy advisors and members of the National Security Council in the Biden administration worked in the Obama administration and appeared to continue to believe Russia is a pure peer to the United States, despite multiple weapon systems being proven not to work as claimed, failing in combat, or simply don't exist. Moscow has likely continued to repeat nuclear threats after learning as early as December 2021 that they are an effective tool to constrict military aid to Ukraine, which explains why the United States government is overly risk-averse. The biggest takeaway? Our assessment that nuclear powers are trapped in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox was accurate. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov once again demanded Ukrainian forces make a full withdrawal from the Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia and Kherson oblasts, and all attempts to join NATO or sign security agreements, vow not to produce nuclear weapons, and partially disarm as a standing point for peace negotiations. Good luck with that. Germany announced that Ukraine received 3 IRIS-T SLM air defense systems and 2 IRIS-T SLS air defense system launches. Our War Crimes and Human Rights section can cover difficult topics, including torture, gender-based violence, war crimes, and violence against children. Today's report does not contain any graphic content. The United Kingdom sanctioned the entirety of the Russian chemical and biological defense troops, the commander of all RBC troops of the Russian Federation, and 2 other Ministry of Defense units for, quote, the abhorrent use of inhumane chemical weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine. In a statement, London said, quote, Russian forces have openly admitted to using hazardous chemical weapons on the battlefield, with widespread use of riot control agents and multiple reports of the use of the toxic choking agent chloropicrine, first deployed on the battlefields of World War I. Russia's flagrant disregard for the Chemical Weapons Convention is a serious violation of international law. Agents of Putin's mafia state were also responsible for deploying the deadly nerve agent Novichok on the streets of Salisbury in 2018 and against opposition leader Alexei Navalny in 2020. Unquote. In September, Russia used chemical weapons 250 times against Ukrainian military positions. A Russian attack on a power facility in the Sumy Oblast wounded 6 civilian power engineers and de-energized a nearby electrical substation. Andriy Yermak, head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, reported that 7 Ukrainian children were returned home as part of the President of Ukraine's Bring Kids Back UA initiative. Their ages range from 3 to 17. It's time to visit the lands of Mobiks, Mobilization and the Mir. The Minister of National Defense of South Korea, Kim Yong-hun, reported that North Korean troops are highly likely to be fighting for Russia in Ukraine. Seoul made similar claims in the spring of 2024, with no evidence to support the deployment of combat and civil engineers to occupied Donetsk. We had reported that Russia was planning to send a small group of North Korean officers as observers. Roskomnadzor blocked the use of Discord and Steam for all Russians, including within the armed forces, cutting off multiple units that use Discord for C2. Russian field units are reportedly furious and frustrated. Discord provided command centers with real-time video feeds of drones, enabling commanders to call in fire missions and missile strikes. Drone operators and commanders called it, quote, the most damaging action possible, reporting that the loss of the streams had pushed operations back to March 2022 levels. We end today's podcast with economic news. Russia's coal mining industry is failing as it faces its worst crisis since the Soviet Union collapsed. According to Rosstat, coal production is down 6.7% year-over-year through July, and production is down 27% compared to 2022. China cut Russian coal imports by 8%, while India cut imports by 55%. Both countries are trying to move away from coal-fired power plants, with China further down the path and working on developing its own sources. Currently, more than half of coal companies are operating at a loss, with the entire industry earning negative 7.1 billion rubles from January to July 2024. Mining companies are facing blocked payments due to sanctions, spiraling shipping costs, and the inability to get new and repair existing equipment due to sanctions. None of these statistics include coal mining facilities in the occupied territories, which Russia has largely neglected since its occupation started in 2014, or outright destroyed during fighting, such as the coke plant in Avdiivka. The problems go beyond weak demand due to a global shift away from coal and sanctions. Neglect by Russia railways has reduced shipping capacity, forcing 2 coal mines to close in Yakutia in March 2024 due to excess reserves. Analysts point out that Moscow's forecast of increasing coal demand from 2030 to 2050 is borderline fantasy due to shifting priorities among coal-consuming nations. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.